Ho, I moved into apartment 2E now, my reflection lives my life, Reddit drama story. They said it was a quiet building. That's what drew me in, honestly, the promise of peace. After the chaos of last year, the idea of silence felt like a balm I could wrap around myself. I signed the lease for apartment 2E on a cloudy Tuesday, the kind of day that made everything feel temporary. The building stood like a tired monument at the end of a cul-de-sac, 3 stories of red brick and rusting balconies, tucked between a shuttered laundromat and a preschool that had more weeds than children. When the landlord handed me the keys, he hesitated, just a beat too long, and said, "You'll like it here. Mostly older tenants, keep to themselves." I took that to mean no parties, no loud music, no chaos. That's what I wanted. What I didn't realize was that quiet wasn't the same as peace. Silence, it turned out, could carry its own kind of noise. The apartment itself was unremarkable: 1 bedroom, cracked tiles in the kitchen, a bathtub that leaned slightly to the left. The windows overlooked the alleyway, and from my living room I could see directly into the back of the preschool yard, its faded plastic toys sun bleached and scattered. On my first night, I sat on the floor with a box of takeout and listened. I always listen in new places. You can learn everything about a building by its sounds. Pipes moaned faintly above me. Someone must have turned on their shower. The radiator hissed like it had secrets to tell. Somewhere far off, a television murmured an infomercial. But what struck me most was what I didn't hear. No footsteps, no doors, no voices. It was like I was the only one breathing in that building. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. But it didn't last. The second night, I heard it. A soft thud. Not rhythmic like footsteps, more like something heavy dropping once and then nothing. I sat up in bed, straining. Then a minute later, a dragging sound. Long and low. Not loud, but unmistakable. It came from the other side of my bedroom wall. The wall I shared with 20F. I remembered the landlord saying the unit next door was empty, undergoing light renovation. Maybe a contractor forgot to lock up. I convinced myself it was nothing. The third night, I woke at 3:12 am exactly. My phone screen glowed, showing the time like a warning. Again thud, then drag, longer this time, closer. I pressed my ear to the wall, silence, and then, faint, almost imagined, a whisper. I couldn't make out words, only that it was low and hurried, not pleading, not angry, more like rehearsing. I told myself I was just overtired. Unpacking all day, new place, stress. It had to be that. But it didn't stop. Every night, always around the same time, the sequence returned: the thud, the drag, the whisper. I started recording audio on my phone, leaving it by the wall overnight. In the morning, I'd scrub through the static and find nothing. The sounds were only for me. One morning, I ran into the woman from 2D as she was checking her mail. She was in her 60s maybe, with hair dyed a red too bright to be natural and an ankle-length skirt that swayed even when she stood still. I asked casually if she knew what was going on next door. Her face changed immediately. She didn't look confused or curious. She looked shut, like a door slammed shut behind her eyes. "You're in 2E?" she asked. I nodded. "Just keep your head down. It's a quiet building," she said, and walked away. I didn't try to talk to her again. By the end of the first week, I stopped sleeping through the night. I left the lights on. I set up a white noise machine, which helped drown out the worst of it, but that somehow made the silence between the sounds even louder. I started to dread 3:12. My heart would start racing at 3:10. I would sit up in bed, eyes on the wall, waiting. It always came. The thud, the drag, and one night, I heard a knock, not on my door, on the shared wall, 3 slow knocks. Then nothing. I didn't sleep at all that night. The next day, I knocked on 20F's door. Just once, just to prove something to myself. No answer. The peephole was stuffed with tissue paper. I went downstairs to the mailboxes. 2F's slot had no name. No flyers, no mail, no dust even. It was like it had never existed. When I asked the landlord again, he waved me off. "Contractors come and go," he said. "That unit's sealed till the new tenant arrives. Probably just pipes." But there were no signs of work being done. No hammering, no workers. Just that sound, night after night, like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. Then one afternoon I came home and found a note under my door. It was a torn piece of graph paper, folded twice. No envelope. No name. Just one line, written in block letters. I do est enlica by Guy Ginord. I stared at it for a long time. My first instinct was to throw it away, but I didn't. I placed it in a drawer and locked it, as if locking it would make it less real. That night, the sound started earlier. 2:47 a.m. The dragging was louder, angrier. The knocks more insistent. 5 of them this time, spaced precisely. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. Then I heard my own name whispered. Once. Then again. Not from the wall, from inside the room. The next day I booked a motel. I needed space, air, something to break whatever this was. But when I tried to leave the building, the front door was stuck, not lock it. Just wouldn't move. I twisted the knob, pulled. Shove nothing. Then, just as I stepped back in defeat, it opened on its own. Like someone had released it from the other side, I left without looking back. At the motel, I slept through the day. I felt stupid. Paranoid. Maybe I had sleep paralysis. Maybe I was having a breakdown. But when I returned the next evening, just to grab a few more things, the door to 20F was open. Not wide. Just a crack. Enough to see inside. The room was empty. No floors. No ceiling. No drywall. Just darkness, like the apartment had been gutted to its bones, or never built at all. I should have run. I know that now. But I stepped forward, just enough to peek inside. And I swear to you I saw a figure. Not standing. Not moving, but pressed flat against the far wall like a shadow with no source. Watching. I slammed the door and backed away. It didn't make a sound. The air was too thick to carry it. I moved out the next day. Told the landlord I had a family emergency. He didn't argue. Just nodded like he'd heard that before. I never went back. But sometimes when I wake in the middle of the night, I still check the time. And when it's 3:12 a.m., I swear, I can still hear the dragging, even from miles away. I tried to convince myself it was over after I left apartment 20E. That it was all contained within those walls. That's something about that building. Its silence, its history, its darkness had infected my mind, and that distance would cleanse me. I moved into a newer complex across town, all white painted walls and fox wood floors, the kind of place with keyless entry and quiet neighbors who smiled too much. It was sterile, and that's what I wanted. I didn't tell anyone why I moved out so fast. When people asked, I gave some vague excuse about the place being too old, bad plumbing, maybe mold. But the truth itched beneath my skin, like a rash I couldn't scratch without bleeding. I kept the note though. It doostat laka by guy I grono ard. I'd taped it to the back of a drawer in my desk like it was a cursed artifact. Some part of me wanted to forget, but a smaller, deeper part refused to let go. I wanted answers, but more than that, I wanted to feel sane again. Nights were easier in the new place at first. I fell asleep watching sitcoms with the volume low, the glow of the screen keeping the shadows in check. But within a week, it began again, subtle at first. A sound I couldn't place, soft scrape along the far wall of my bedroom. Not dragging exactly, but something close. At 3:12 every time. Not every time. Not later. Always 3:12. That's specific. I jolt upright, heart pounding, drenched in sweat even though the room was cool. It was as if the air changed at that moment, turned thick and deliberate. I moved the bed away from the wall, tried sleeping in the living room, even turned on every light in the apartment and left them on all night. Nothing helped. I never saw anything, never felt touched or threatened, but the dread was physical, like someone unseen pressing down on my chest, whispering just out of hearing. On the third week, I found something even worse than the note. My phone had recorded a voice memo. I didn't remember starting it. The file was short, 8 seconds, and just labeled 312. I sat frozen before pressing play. At first, silence, then my name. But not in my voice, not whispered either. Spoken softly, like someone familiar calling across a room. Calm. Certain, I dropped the phone. My throat felt like it was closing, my hands shaking. I deleted the file immediately, but the voice stayed, lodged in my memory like a shard of glass. That same day, I decided to see a therapist. Her name was Lydia, early 40s, with that calm, slow speaking way that either grounded you or made you feel insane by contrast. I told her what I could without sounding like a lunatic. Nightmares, sleep paralysis, auditory hallucinations. She nodded, took notes, asked about my stress levels, prescribed grounding exercises, suggested a sleep study. I left her office feeling stupid, but less alone. That night, for the first time in days, I fell asleep before midnight, and then I woke again. 3:12 a.m. The scrape was louder now, like something had learned I was listening. I sat up slowly and turned on the lamp. It flickered once before holding steady. I turned my head toward the wall. Nothing, but then, something new. The blinds on the window started to sway. There was no breeze. The window was sealed shut. Still, the blinds moved gently, side to side, like someone breathing behind them. I got up, teeth clenched, and yanked them open. Nothing there. Just the dark outside, parking lot lights reflecting off empty asphalt. But when I turned back toward the bed, I froze. Another note. This one wasn't slid under the door. It was resting on my pillow. Neat. Waiting. I stood in that room for what felt like hours, staring at it. The paper was the same. Graph. Same block letters, but I hadn't left the door unlocked. I checked the security log from my phone. No entries. No one had come in. I slept in my car that night. In the morning, I took the note to the police. Told them someone was breaking in. They filed a report, took the paper, told me they'd install a patrol route near my complex. But I could tell by their faces they thought I was lying. Or worse, making it up. I didn't care. I just wanted to believe that there was still a line between real and imagined. I started researching, not on paranormal forums. I didn't want ghost stories. I wanted structural reports, property histories, anything concrete. I called the management office of my old building, said I was considering moving back in. The guy on the phone paused when I asked about 20F. Sorry, that unit's sealed. Hasn't been available for years. Renovations, I asked. Something like that, he said, voice flat. Honestly, I don't have access to that record. I hung up and tried another route, City Records. Found out the original plans for the building included a 20F, but a fire had gutted that part of the second floor 3 decades ago. The blueprints had been altered afterward. According to records, apartment 20F no longer existed, but I'd stood outside that door. I'd heard the knocks, the whispers. I saw the open room. I knew what I saw. I reached out to the previous tenant of 2E, tracked him down on a tenant complaint forum. He never replied. His account disappeared a week later. The building itself started showing up in old newspaper clippings. A string of missing persons between 1989 and 1996. All tenants, all from the second floor. No connections. One article mentioned an coincident, involving a resident barricading themselves inside 2E, carving symbols into the floorboards, refusing to eat. The article ended without explaining what happened next. That's when I stopped trying to explain it. It wasn't just a haunting, it was something deeper. A presence, maybe, but not one bound to space. It had followed me. Or I'd carried it. That night, I returned to the new apartment and found all the drawers open. Every single one. Kithroom. Desk. Even ones I hadn't touched in days. And inside each one, a scrap of paper. All blank, except the one in the fridge, tucked between 2 eggs. That one said, Geo Bakukai. I moved again. Another apartment, different part of town. I didn't leave a forwarding address. Changed my number. I even got rid of everything I had brought with me from 2E, the desk, the mattress, the boxes I never fully unpacked. I tried to start over. But the next time I visited Lydia, she asked if I had been practicing my grounding. I said yes. She nodded, then handed me something. This was in the waiting room chair. I thought you dropped it. I unfolded the paper. Graphed letters. Boyo kan tegyo beke, onel do en. I didn't scream out, but I didn't. I smiled, thanked her, and walked out. I drove aimlessly for hours. Every red light felt like a threat. Every reflection in the rearview looked just slightly wrong. I checked into a roadside motel with cash. No ID, no records. The room smelled like bleach and old cigarettes. I welcomed it. But that night, the sound came again. Not from the wall, not from under the bed, from the vent above me. A slow, deliberate dragging, like something pulling itself along the ducts. I didn't sleep. I didn't move. When dawn came, I gathered my things and made one decision. I wasn't going to run anymore. I was going to return to apartment 2E, to whatever lived next door. I had to see it, understand it, maybe end it. Or at least make it real. The only way out, I realized, was through. That night, I returned to the old building. The street looked smaller, the bricks more weathered. My key still worked. The hallway smelled like it always had. Dust, old paint, something faintly metallic. I stood in front of 2E, then, slowly, turned to 20F. The door was sealed, no handle, no keyhole. But there were scratch marks along the bottom edge, like something had tried to claw its way out, or in. I placed my hand on the door. It was warm, almost pulsing. And just as I leaned in, ear to the wood, I heard it, my voice, from inside, saying my name, followed by the sound I feared most. That long, deliberate drag, getting closer. I didn't move, couldn't. The sound on the other side of that door, my own voice, warped and distant, followed by the dragging, froze me in place, like every nerve had turned to glass. I stood there with my palm pressed to the wood, and it throbbed beneath my skin like a living thing. I told myself to back away, to walk, to run if I could, but instead I leaned in closer. The door was seamless now. No knob, no frame, just a wall with the memory of a doorway, as if it had never been a door at all, only a suggestion. And yet something waited behind it, something that knew me, that remembered. I turned slowly and went back into 2E. The apartment was exactly as I had left it, except quieter. Not the peaceful kind of quiet I once hoped for, but that heavy, suffocating stillness that presses down on your lungs like deep water. My old mattress sat in the corner, dusty and misshapen. A coffee mug I had forgotten about stood on the windowsill, rim cracked. I touched the wall between my apartment and 20F again. This time it felt cooler, like whatever was on the other side had pulled back. For now, I dropped my bag on the floor and sat down cross-legged, staring at the wall like it might open up and swallow me whole. Hours passed. I didn't speak. I just waited. At exactly 3:12 a.m., the sound came again, not from behind the wall, but from inside the room. The same dragging, only this time it circled me. No footsteps, no shadows, just that slow circular pull, as if something unseen was drawing a line around my body. I didn't break. I didn't even breathe. Then came the whisper. Not my name this time, a sentence, a command. Sit still. Let me see. It came from everywhere at once. Behind my ear, under the floor, above the ceiling. I felt cold fingers brush my neck but saw nothing when I turned, and then everything stopped, not faded, not slowed. Just stopped, like someone had pulled the plug on sound itself. I stood. The floor beneath me felt soft, like damp wood or sponge. My legs were trembling, but not from fear, some deeper instinct. Like prey sensing a predator nearby. I approached the wall again. It was breathing now. The paint pulsed like a chest rising and falling, and I could feel my heartbeat syncing with it. I lifted my hand and pressed hard against it. And that's when the wall gave way. Not like a door opening, not like drywall breaking, but like falling through warm tar. It swallowed my arm up to the elbow before I could react. I pulled back fast, heart racing. My arm was dry, clean, untouched, but I wasn't a wall. Not anymore. I didn't sleep that night. I waited for sunrise, and when it came, the apartment was ordinary again. Still, silent, but changed. Or maybe I had changed. I left the building that morning, but not for good. I returned to Lydia's office later that day, told her everything. Every whisper, every sound, the doorway that wasn't. She looked at me like someone staring at a painting they can't quite interpret. Then she asked, carefully, if I had considered checking into a facility. I laughed. I had expected that. I told her I wasn't crazy, that something was happening, something real. Something no one else could see because they didn't know where to look. Her response was calm, practiced, clinical. She said perception can be shaped by trauma, by isolation, by fear. She said the mind sometimes invents patterns to make sense of uncertainty. I asked her if her chair felt different when she sat in it lately. She blinked. I told her the color of her wallpaper had changed. The sound of the clock in the waiting room was 2 ticks off. The light above her head had stopped buzzing. Little things, tiny inconsistencies. Not enough to scream, but enough to whisper. Her pen paused on her notepad. "You're watching me," she said. "No," I replied. "It is. That was our last session." I don't know if she believed me, but when I checked back weeks later, her office was cleared out. No forwarding address, no trace she had ever practiced there. I started spending more time in the library searching for blueprints, for rumors, for anyone else who'd lived in Tuyi. That's when I found her, Janine R. She lived in Tuyi during the early 2000s. I tracked her down through a forgotten forum thread where she'd mentioned the thing in the wall. The post was old, barely archived. I found her in a town 2 states over. She ran a thrift shop, wore gloves even in summer, and flinched at loud noises. I introduced myself, told her I was researching the building. She said nothing for a long time. Then finally, softly, "You let it talk to you." I nodded.
"Did you answer? No."
She breathed a shaky sigh. "Then you might still be safe." She told me she'd lived in Tuyi for 6 months, said it started with sounds, then dreams. Then things missing. Not big things. Small, toothbrush, socks, a photo frame. "I never saw it," she said. But I knew it was there. I'd wake up and feel it behind me, not touching me, just present, like it was learning me. I asked why she left. Her eyes narrowed. I didn't. My sister dragged me out. Said she found me standing in the hallway one night. Just screaming. When I woke up, I couldn't remember anything. I asked if it followed her. She didn't answer. But I saw her eyes flick to the back room of her shop, where the door was chained from the outside. I thanked her and left. That night, I returned again to the apartment. Tuyi was mine still, whether I admitted it or not. It didn't let go. And I wasn't ready to let go either. I needed to know. The wall was thinner now. I could see it ripple when I approached. I didn't press my hand this time. I sat across from it, waited. 3:12 came like a metronome. The air thickened. The dragging sound began. But this time I whispered, "I hear you." The wall didn't respond, at first. Then it started to dissolve. Not like something opening, but like a membrane becoming transparent. And through it I saw something. A room like mine, but not. Same dimensions. Same furniture. But wrong. The shadows moved on their own. The angles stretched in ways they shouldn't, and in the center sat a figure. Me. But not me. Same clothes. Same hair. But the eyes. Black pits where eyes should be. The copy tilted its head, smiled, then opened its mouth far too wide and whispered back, "Let's trade." I backed away. But I didn't run. I couldn't. Because the moment I looked behind me, I saw another door. One I hadn't noticed before. A third door in the apartment. Plain, white with a brass knob. I walked toward it, breath shallow, opened it. Inside was a staircase, not going up or down. Just away, into black. The air that flowed from it smelled like memory, like places I'd never been but always feared. The stairs seemed endless, and from below I heard the copy laugh. Not loud, not cruel, just amused, like it had been waiting, like this was always where I was meant to go. I closed the door, locked it, turned back toward the wall, and the wall was solid again, silent, as if nothing had ever happened. But the latter echoed long after. The next day I found another note, in my fridge again. Yo can opan it buvo uo uraed wa. I didn't know which it meant. The wall, the door, or myself. Maybe all three, maybe none. But I knew this: the apartment didn't want to scare me. Not really. It wanted to know me, to become me. And every night I stayed, it got better at it. More accurate. More convincing. I began catching glimpses of myself. Across windows, in reflections that didn't match my movements. I'd wave and the reflection wouldn't. I'd blink and the glass wouldn't. And once, shaving, I saw a second me standing behind me, just for a moment. Not moving, watching. I didn't scream, I didn't move. Just kept shaving as if that could make it leave. But it didn't. And now it stands closer every night, just outside the mirror's edge. Waiting, becoming. Knowing. And the worst part is, every night I feel a little more like the reflection, and a little less like the one in the mirror. I started losing time. Minutes at first. Then hours. I'd wake up in different parts of the apartment, disoriented, muscles sore like I'd been somewhere, done something but had no memory of it. One morning I found my phone full of photos I hadn't taken. Pictures of the hallway outside 2DE, shots of my own sleeping face, zoomed in images of my eyes, always at 312 a.m. sharp. Some were taken from angles that made no sense. Impossibly high or from outside the window, 10 feet off the ground. I deleted them in panic, then regretted it instantly. They were evidence. Proof that something was happening, something beyond explanation, something hungry. But the moment I deleted them, I felt it. Disappointment, not mine. The apartment's, that presence, like I had erased its favorite game. That day, I noticed the mirror in the bathroom no longer reflected things the same way. I'd raise my right hand, and my reflection would lift its left, as it should. But there was always a delay. Fractional. Almost imperceptible, but it grew longer with each passing day. By the end of the week, I would move and then wait a full second before the mirror caught up. I tried filming it, but the video showed no delay. Only my eyes, caught in a stillness I didn't recognize. And always, behind me in the reflection, something out of focus, like a smear in the air, slowly sharpening into form. The third door, the one I found in the back of 2E, never went away. I locked it, boarded it up. Once, I even dragged the refrigerator in front of it, but every morning the door was exposed again. Not violently. Not as if it had been broken into. Just clean. Undisturbed. As though it had always been like that. The boards were neatly stacked in the corner. The fridge back in its original place. The lock always melted down into a puddle of metal, as if heat had been applied from the inside. I tried not to look at it. Tried to pretend the apartment still belonged to me. But it didn't. It hadn't in a long time. It was wearing me now. Trying me on like a skin. Each night the sounds returned with more clarity. Not just dragging or knocking, but voices now. Mocking tones in my own cadence. Repeating things I'd said in therapy. Muttering sentences I'd spoken aloud to myself. Once, I caught it whispering, "You're not real anymore." Over and over until I screamed just to drown it out. The scream didn't echo. The walls swallowed it whole. On a particularly cold evening, I decided to sleep on the floor near the front door, convinced that if I could just stay near an exit, I'd feel safer. I closed my eyes, wrapped in 2 blankets, and tried to imagine I was somewhere else. Anywhere else. At exactly 3:12 a.m., I opened my eyes, not because of a sound, but because of a shift. The entire apartment had changed, subtly. The dimensions were off, the walls farther apart, the furniture too new, like a mock-up built by someone who had seen photos of my life but never lived it. The colors were wrong. The shadows fell in impossible directions. And worst of all, the door I had fallen asleep next to was gone. Just blank wall now. No knob. No frame. No seams. I was inside the reflection. The realization came not like a scream, but a slow, sinking weight. I stumbled toward the bathroom, and the mirror greeted me with a cruel truth. I wasn't in it. There was no reflection at all, just the room behind me, and in its center, me, the other me, sitting calmly on the edge of the tub, smiling, not with teeth, with understanding, like it had been waiting for me to catch up. I turned away, but the reflection whispered, "Stay." I didn't respond. I ran to the kitchen, heart hammering, mouth dry. But the kitchen wasn't mine. The fridge buzzed in reverse. The faucet dripped upward. The window showed not the alleyway, but a flat, endless plane of mirrors stacked on mirrors, each one reflecting a version of the apartment slightly wrong. I saw one where I was on the ceiling, walking like gravity had reversed. Another where I was gone completely, and only the shadow remained. And in one, the last one, I saw the version of me that had made it out, smiling, normal, happy, free. I banged on the glass until my fists bled, but it didn't crack. That version of me never looked up, never saw me. It was like watching someone else live the life I lost. I sank to the floor, cried until there were no more tears. Time passed strangely in that place. There was no light change, no sound of birds or traffic, only me, and the dragging. Always the dragging, not closer, just constant, circular, like it was pacing, hunting, measuring. On what I guessed was the third day, I tried the third door again. This time, it opened like it had been waiting. The staircase was unchanged, still spiraling into nothing, lit by no source I could name. I stepped through. The air shifted immediately. It was colder, thicker, but also somehow welcoming, like I had stepped into something's breath. The stairs bent gravity. One moment I was descending, the next I was walking sideways, then upside down, yet I never stumbled. It felt like the staircase remembered me, carried me. And then, the bottom, another door. This one was wooden, ancient-looking, with carvings that weren't letters but impressions of eyes and hands and mouths. I pushed it open. Inside was a room made entirely of mirrors, floor to ceiling, every direction, and in each one a different version of me. Hundreds, thousands. Some were screaming, others whispering, a few sobbing, many staring directly at me with an expression I couldn't place. Like they knew something I didn't. In the center stood a figure. My double, the one from the mirror. He smiled, stepped forward, and said nothing, just raised a hand and pointed to the wall behind him. There, etched into the glass, were words. T-H-E-F-I-R-S-T-O-L-O-W-Y Lois. I didn't understand at first. Then he stood across from me. We locked eyes. The room fell into silence. I couldn't blink, couldn't move, just stare. At myself. At what I'd become. The longer we stared, the more I felt pieces of me unraveling. Memories slipping, identity fraying. I could feel myself diluting into the gaze, becoming a copy of the copy. And then he blinked. Just once. But I saw it. That flicker. That break. The glass behind him cracked. The room trembled. Mirrors began to shatter one by one. Screams erupted from every corner, but not mine. The copies panicked, collapsed, shattered, and I stood still, whole. I reached forward and touched the cracked glass. It gave way like paper, and I stepped through. When I woke, I was back in 2E, the real one. Morning light streaming through the window. My furniture just as I left it. The walls solid. No third door. No whispers. No dragging. For the first time in weeks, silence felt real. The mirror reflected me perfectly. No delay, no shadow. I was back. But something was off. Something small. Almost invisible. On the fridge was a note, but not on graph paper. Plain white. Handwritten in cursive. My handwriting. It said, "We switched." My breath caught it. I looked at the mirror again. Blinked. Weeded. The reflection matched perfectly. Too perfectly. I moved my hand. My eyes. It followed. But something in its smile was too easy. Too rehearsed. I wasn't sure anymore who I was. Or where I was. Or if the switch had happened when I won. Or when I looked away. Maybe the game never ended. Maybe I had never returned. Or worse, maybe I was still there, staring, losing, forgotten. And this ruled, this reflection, was the reward. The prison dressed as home. I walked to the door. Opened it. Outside was the hallway. Familiar, normal. But every door now looked the same, all numbered 2E. And from behind each one, I could hear the same voice. Mine. Whispering. Let's trade. I left the apartment that morning without packing, without thinking, without even locking the door behind me. Not because I didn't care. Because I knew locks wouldn't matter anymore. Not to this. I walked the streets like a ghost, uncertain if I was watching the world or if it was watching me. Everyone I passed looked slightly off, like wax replicas half melted in the sun. Expressions just a beat too slow, eyes that didn't quite focus, lips that whispered without sound. It wasn't paranoia. It was recognition. I was seeing what had always been there. Fractures, reflections. The world wasn't broken, not yet. But it was cracking. I checked into a motel across town, used a fake name, paid cash. The clerk barely looked up, but when he handed me the key, he said, "Room 212. You'll like it. Quiet place." My blood ran cold. 212. A mirror of 2E. I didn't correct him, didn't ask for another room. I took the key and climbed the stairs with the distinct feeling that every step echoed in a delay, like someone was a few paces behind me but never catching up. The room was dim, curtains already drawn though it was midday. No art on the walls, no TV, just a bed and a mirror. I stood in front of it for a long time. This one didn't try anything. No delay, no shadows, no movement out of sync. It reflected what I gave it, but the stillness was a warning in itself, like something waiting to be invited. I slept that night with the mirror covered by a towel. No dreams, no sounds, just a void. But when I woke up, the towel was gone, folded neatly on the nightstand, and written on the mirror in my own handwriting were the words, "You're not done." I wanted to run again. I wanted to burn the motel down and erase every trace of myself, but I knew better now. It wouldn't matter where I went. The thing, whatever it was, wasn't bound to 2E anymore. It had found its way into me. Or maybe it always had been there, biding its time until I looked long enough for it to see back. I called Janine. No answer, no voicemail. The line went dead after one ring. I called again. Nothing. I checked her thrift shop's online page. Permanently closed. A red banner across the screen. I shouldn't have been surprised. I wasn't. Still, something inside me broke a little more. She had been my only connection to someone who understood. Someone who had stood where I stood. Now she was gone. And I was alone. That day, I began documenting everything. I filled notebooks, drew diagrams, mapped timelines. Not because I thought I could solve it, but because I needed to anchor myself to something. Dates, places, names, anything real. Anything not shifting beneath me. I tried to recreate the map of the apartment as I remembered it. But each time I drew it, something was different. A wall was too long. A door opened the wrong way. The hallway had one more bend than I recalled. It was like the memory had been copied and altered just enough to lose fidelity. I flipped through the pages in frustration, and that's when I noticed the margins. I hadn't written in them, but someone had. Small, cramped text in pencil. Always the same line repeated over and over. LEVN. I tore the pages out, burned them in the motel sink. Watched the ash swirl like it had breath. That night, I locked the mirror in the bathroom, shut the door, left the light on. But still, at 3:12 am, I woke up, not to a sound, but to movement. The bed was shaking, gently, rhythmically, like something breathing beneath the mattress. I jumped up, heart racing, and yanked the bathroom door open. The mirror was gone. Not broken, not removed, gone. A blank square of wall where it had been, and scratched into the tiles beneath the sink were 4 words. I never left ya. I ran, pack. Didn't turn off the lights. I just ran. Outside the night was too still. Not quiet. Still. Like the entire world had hit pause, and I was the only thing still playing. I walked until dawn, until my feet blistered and my legs gave out. I collapsed on a bench outside a church, sweat, soaked and shaking. And then the bells rang. Not the churches, not real bells. The ones from the apartment. From 2E, soft and slow, like chimes underwater. A melody I hadn't realized I'd memorized. I covered my ears. It didn't help. The sound was inside me. That day, I found myself back at the building. I didn't mean to go there. I didn't plan it. But my feet carried me to the street and there it was, unchanged. As if no time had passed. As if it had been waiting. I walked in. No one stopped me. The hallway smelled exactly the same. Paint and mildew and something older. The light above 2E flickered once, then held steady. I reached for the knob. It turned. The door opened. The apartment was clean. Bright even. Someone had painted. New floorboards. New fixtures. Someone had renovated. I stepped inside. Nothing strange. Nothing off. Except on the wall where the mirror had once hung was a photograph. A black and white shot of me. Not smiling. Not posing. Just sitting on the edge of the bed. Eyes hollow. Mouth open like I'd been mid-scream. I stepped closer. Beneath the photo, a small brass plaque. Donor unknown. 2D exhibit. I spun around. The furniture was arranged like a showroom. Museum lighting. Labels on each piece. Chair, circa 2003. Owner, unlisted. Notebook, found beneath floorboards. Author unknown. Graph paper, Greer, message fragment, Lukaik. My heart pounded. I stumbled backward, and that's when I saw the others, people. Watching. Silent. On the other side of what I now realized was glass. One way, I was on display. A part of the exhibit. One child pointed at me. The mother pulled her hand away and whispered something. The tour guide. Yes, there was one. Tapped her mic and said, "This particular subject remained in 2DE for 3 cycles before we lost track of its origin point. No one has entered this unit since until now. I screamed. I banged on the glass. I yelled that I wasn't part of this, that I was real, but they just watched. Calm, curious, detached, like I was a fish in a tank, a subject in a case, a memory they'd already cataloged. I turned. The door I'd come through was gone. In its place, a mirror. Floor to ceiling. And inside it, not my reflection. Not anymore. A room full of me, all of them turning slowly. Smiling, approaching. The mirror began to ripple. I backed away. My spine hit the cold wall. The glass began to bend outward, pushing in the room like something on the other side wanted out. Or in, I closed my eyes, thought of Janine, of Lydia, of the nope yo tan o it da you do yo ya per 80wa. I opened my eyes. The room was empty. No mirrors, no audience. No exhibit, just me, alone, in apartment 2E, like nothing had happened, except for one thing, my reflection. It moved first, just barely. A blink ahead, a smirk forming before mine, and then, slowly, it lifted its hand and pressed it against the inside of the glass. I didn't move. Neither did it. We stayed like that, two people separated by a thin sheet of false reality. And then it mouthed something I'll never forget. "You're the copy now." I stood frozen, watching the reflection mimic me just a second too soon, a fraction too confidently, like it knew it no longer needed to wait. The apartment was still, the kind of stillness you only find after something has already happened, after the door has already been opened, after the thing you tried to keep out is already inside. I was staring at myself, but I wasn't looking at me. The smirk, the tilt of the head, the glint in its eyes. It was all wrong, familiar only in the way a lie wears truth like a mask. I raised my hand and the reflection beat me to it. Then it dropped its hand. I hadn't moved. It smiled wider. That was when I understood it was no longer reflecting. It was rehearsing, practicing, perfecting me. I staggered back, breath shallow, the walls of 2E spinning around me in a quiet panic. The mirror didn't move. The image stayed right where it was, staring out at me like I was the one trapped now. Maybe I was. Maybe I had been for a while and just hadn't realized it. I touched my face, half expecting to feel glass, expecting to see cracked spiderweb across my skin. But I was whole. At least I thought I was. The apartment, as always, gave nothing away. The mirror stood motionless, no longer mocking, no longer trying to push through. It didn't need to. The message was clear it had won. And I didn't even know when. I sat down on the edge of the bed. My bed, though it no longer felt like mine. I looked around the room as if clues might be tucked into the corners, into the shadows. Nothing. No notes. No whispers. Not even the dragging sound. That almost disturbed me more. I had become used to the presence, to the nightly rhythm of dread and denial. But now, silence, clean, final. I wasn't sure if that meant it was over or just beginning in a new way. The next day, I walked the city like a tourist in my own life. The streets felt different, stretched. Colors were more saturated. People's faces seemed too symmetrical, too perfectly placed. I sat on a bench and tried to think, really think, about everything that had happened. But memory failed me in pieces. Dates blurred. Sequences twisted. I couldn't remember the last time I saw my real reflection, the last time I looked in a mirror and felt certain I was the one looking out. That's when I saw it. Across the street, in the glass of a cafe window. Me, but not where I should be. I was sitting here, but the reflection showed me walking, pacing with hands in pockets. I stood, and the reflection froze, just stared, then lifted its hand and waved. I stumbled backward into the crowd. No one noticed. No one cared. I rushed into the cafe, pushed past the counter, reached the window. But the glass now only showed the street behind me, bustling and bland. The reflection was gone, like it had never been there. But I knew better. It was watching. Testing. I was being studied, examined, filed under a category I couldn't name. Back at the modal, because I still hadn't left, hadn't dared return to a life that felt more fictional by the hour. I found my notebooks had been rearranged. Pages I had scribbled on were now clean, blank, and the blank pages now held full entries in my handwriting, recounting events I didn't remember, conversations I hadn't had, descriptions of places I hadn't been. But they were written in my style, my voice, and they sounded right, believable, too believable. I read through them in horror, realizing someone, or something was writing my life over me, rewriting my timeline word by word, until I was only a story it told. That night I dreamed of the hallway in 2E, only it never ended. It just stretched endlessly, door after door, each one marked, each one slightly different. Colors, knobs, scratches. I walked for hours, until I found a door with a note pinned to it. This one was handwritten, ink smudged, paper yellowed. It said, "You're not supposed to be here. Leave before you become part of the archive." I opened the door. Inside was me, sitting in a chair, blindfolded, breathing. I didn't enter. I shut the door and the hallway vanished like smoke. I woke up screaming. The motel manager knocked, asked if I was okay. I told him I'd be leaving soon. But he shook his head and said, "You already checked out. Yesterday." I didn't argue, just closed the door and sat in the dark. The next day, I decided to try something desperate. I broke into the maintenance office of my old apartment building. I needed records, history, something tangible. The office was dusty, cluttered, filled with boxes marked with years and unit numbers. I found the file for 2E. It was thinner than I expected, just a handful of documents. But at the very back, there was a photograph, black and white, blurry. It showed a man standing in the hallway of 2E staring at the door to 20F. His posture was familiar, his clothes, his hair. It was me. The date, 41 years ago. I dropped the file, backed away. My hands were shaking. I didn't feel real anymore, not solid. I ran. But where do you run when the thing you're fleeing is wearing your face? I tried mirrors again, covered them all, then uncovered them one by one. In every one, I looked right. No delay, no distortion, but something was always off. One eye slightly darker, one hand twitching too soon, one version of me always smiling just a little too long after I stopped. I couldn't trust them. I couldn't trust myself. The world was fracturing and I was the fulcrum. And then, on what I thought might be the final night, I got another under the door. Not on the fridge, on my skin. Written in ink along my left forearm were the words, HGHTISTSYTH. I scrubbed at it, clawed at it, but it wouldn't fade. It wasn't written. It was etched. Like a signature. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in front of the mirror in the motel room, staring into it, waiting. At 3:03 a.m., the lights flickered. The mirror began to hum, and the version of me inside began to move. He rose, pressed a palm to the glass. I matched it. He smiled. I didn't. The hum grew louder. The room began to shake. The air thickened like oil. And then he stepped through. It wasn't like walking. He didn't break the glass. He didn't even move. 1 second he was behind it, and the next he was in front of me. And I was no longer there. I was inside, watching. I pounded on the glass, screamed, begged. He looked at me with mild amusement. Then he walked to the sink, splashed his face, took my phone, scrolled through my contacts, sent a message to someone I hadn't spoken to in years. "I'm back. Let's catch up." Then he smiled into the mirror. I knew then what Janine meant, what Lydia feared, what all the notes had been warning me of. I hadn't been haunted, I'd been hunted, studied, duplicated, prepared. He left the room. I stayed, trapped in silver. Now, every day, I watch through mirrors, through reflections, through screens. I see what he's doing. He's good at it, better than I was. People trust him. They like him. He doesn't scream at night. He doesn't question shadows. He's calm, collected. Everything I wasn't. Everything I tried to be. But sometimes he walks past a mirror and catches my eyes watching. And he pauses, smiles, and whisks the glass. "Don't worry. You'll forget soon. I already am. Some days I can't remember my name, or my voice, or what it felt like to be on the other side. I'm just an echo now. A flicker behind the glass. And maybe you're reading this. Maybe you're wondering if it's a story, a dream, a warning. But ask yourself this. When was the last time your reflection moved exactly when you did? Not a second early. Not a beat behind. Next time you look in a mirror, pay attention. Watch carefully. Because one day, it might smile first. And when it does, you won't be the one walking away. Enjoyed the video? Give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you never miss an update.